The power of conscious unavailability. Why silence changes everything. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to shift the entire room without saying a word? They don't shout, they don't argue, they don't beg, they simply pull back and suddenly everything changes. The energy shifts. People chase, people question, people feel. Now imagine if you did the same, if you stopped reacting to everything, if you chose silence over explanation, withdrawal over emotional outbursts. What would happen? Here's the truth. When you stop being constantly available physically, emotionally, mentally, the world around you goes into quiet panic, because your reactions were never just communication, they were control points. People are used to pulling your strings. They're used to your yes, your quick reply, your predictability. But the day you stop playing that role, the game collapses. The same people who thought they knew you suddenly realize they never really did. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." So ask yourself, who gets desperate when you become distant? Who provokes you just to pull emotion out of you? That tells you everything you need to know, not about them, but about how much of your energy is still being controlled without your awareness. You give to avoid conflict. You say yes to feel accepted. You respond to not be abandoned. And every time you do, you lose a little bit of yourself. That's why at the end of the day, you feel tired, bitter, and hollow without knowing why. Because you were too available for people who didn't deserve even a second of your silence. This isn't about shutting out the world. It's about choosing yourself. It's about individuation, Jung's term for becoming whole, authentic, real. And it begins when you realize silence isn't weakness, it's strength. Withdrawal isn't escape, it's power. It comes from awareness. So now I ask you, how long will you keep letting other people's emotions dictate your life? How long will you dance every time someone pushes your pain? Maybe it's time to cut the strings, to become a mystery. Because when you stop being available, everything changes. From the moment we're children, we're taught that being kind means being accessible. Be present. Answer quickly. Please others. Never say no. But here's what no one tells you. Excessive availability isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment. The more accessible you are, the more you're taken for granted. You become a tool, something people use when they want comfort, validation, or distraction. And once you stop being useful, they move on. Because predictability becomes invisibility. They don't see youth, they see what you give. They press you like an emotional button, and you'll respond. Why? Because you're afraid. Afraid of being rejected. Afraid of seeming cold. Afraid of being unloved. But let's be real. Saying yes when you mean no is emotional slavery. Justifying yourself constantly is an addiction to approval. Always being available is a silent cry for belonging, and Jung understood this. He called it the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. But that mask is also what keeps you stuck in servitude. Every moment you put others at the center of your life, you vanish from your own. Emotional exhaustion isn't a weakness, it's misdirection. Every time you react impulsively, defend against pointless criticism, engage in drama, try to please people who don't value you, you drain your psychic energy. Jung saw the psyche as an energy system. And energy is not infinite. When you don't protect it, others use it against you. People who lack boundaries are the easiest to control because they're reactive. And when you're reactive, you're predictable. And when you're predictable, you're vulnerable. But true power, it's in choosing when and how to act. It's in knowing your own impulses. It's in holding your energy. Ask yourself, what makes you react immediately? What triggers you to explain yourself? What conversations leave you feeling empty? These are your weak points, and those are the cracks where your energy leaks. Don't patch them with people, reinforce them with awareness, because here's what happens when you stop reacting. You stop feeding the projections others place on you. You stop being their mirror, their emotional dump, their validation source. And guess what? That makes people uncomfortable, because now they have to face themselves, and most people aren't ready for that. When you become silent, people panic. Not because they miss you, but because your silence takes away their control over the story. Silence shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, you set the terms. True silence isn't passive. It's not weakness. It's mastery. It's sovereignty over your energy. It's saying, I won't play your game. Individuation requires this distance. You can't hear your true self through the noise of constant reaction. Yes, silence will confuse people. They'll call you cold, selfish, arrogant. but they never loved you, only the version of you that served their needs. Every word you speak is an energetic investment. Not everyone deserves it. That's the truth. Most won't tell you. Silence forces people to sit with their own thoughts, their own shame, their own chaos. It's not your job to rescue them from that. You owe the world nothing but your truth, and that truth doesn't always need explaining. There will be a cost. You will feel guilty. You'll feel alone. People will distance themselves. Some will lash out, but it's not because you're wrong. It's because you've changed and they can't use you anymore. Let them leave. Because what comes next is clarity. In place of anxiety, you find peace. In place of neediness, you find inner strength. You stop betraying yourself just to belong. You become whole. You stop reacting. You start creating. This is not the end of connection. It's the beginning of real connection with yourself. You will lose people, but you'll find you. You'll stop being available for drama, for manipulation, and you'll become something far more powerful, rare, whole, unforgettable. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Type out, "I choose my peace." Because that choice, it changes everything. Part 2. The Sacred Withdrawal. Why walking away is a spiritual act. There comes a moment in every life, a quiet moment, when you no longer want to explain. Not out of bitterness, but because your soul is tired of translating itself to those committed to misunderstanding it, and so you stop. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop softening your tone. You stop shrinking into a shape that keeps everyone else comfortable. You walk away. And that moment, that sacred withdrawal, is not a breakdown. It's a birth. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But most people will never experience that privilege, because it demands sacrifice. It demands a departure, not just from people, but from old versions of yourself. The rescuer, the emotionally available therapist in every room, the one who keeps the peace by destroying their own. These aren't roles. They're survival strategies. They were useful once, but now they are chains. To become whole, you must break the very identity that once kept you safe. That's the paradox. Healing feels like dying, because in a way it is. You are not just letting go of people. You are letting go of the version of you who needed them. And that version, the one who anxiously waited for a text, who feared abandonment, who tolerated manipulation disguised as love, that version doesn't die quietly. It screams. It bargains. It says, "Please, just go back. It's easier there." But you won't, because something inside you has awakened. Something ancient, something sovereign. This is what Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming psychologically whole. And withdrawal isn't failure. It's the initiation, because only in the silence, far from the roles, the demands, the expectations, can you finally hear the voice underneath all the noise. The voice that says, "This isn't love. This isn't peace. This isn't you. You didn't go quiet. You went home." But let's be honest. Withdrawal hurts, not because of the solitude, but because of what it reveals. When you're no longer distracted by drama, you begin to feel the emotional residue of years spent self-abandoned. All the times you said yes, when you wanted to say no. All the times you tried to heal someone who wasn't even trying to change. All the times you accepted breadcrumbs and called it connection. The silence reveals it all. This is what Jung meant by making the darkness conscious. And the first darkness you'll face is your own complicity. You'll realize you weren't just manipulated. You were available for it. You weren't just used. You ignored the red flags. Not because you're broken, but because your love was louder than your logic, because somewhere deep inside, you believed that being needed was the closest thing to being loved. That's not weakness. And breaking that conditioning is the real spiritual war. Withdrawal is not a retreat. It's a realignment. It's the act of saying, "I will no longer make myself sick, just to keep the peace in rooms that never asked how I was really doing." You're not being cold. You're finally being warm. To yourself, you're not pushing people away. You're realizing some of them were only close because you never had a boundary. And now, in this quiet space, you start to rebuild. Not to become better, but to become whole. Let's talk about the shadow. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate." The shadow is the hidden part of you. The unmet needs, suppressed rage, repressed desires, forgotten grief, unspoken fears. When you were constantly available, You were suppressing these parts. You were too busy managing everyone else's emotions to deal with your own. But now, in withdrawal, the shadow rises. You'll feel anger, not at them, at yourself. You'll feel shame for how much you tolerated, for how long you stayed. You'll want to distract, to call, to scroll, to re-engage, but don't sit with it. Because if you can sit with the shadow, you can finally begin to integrate it. Integration doesn't mean perfection. It means honesty. It means saying, I used to betray myself to be loved. I used to confuse chaos with passion. I used to stay silent because I feared abandonment. And instead of hiding from these truths, you face them. You don't shame them. You name them. Because everything you hide becomes your prison, but everything you own becomes your power. There is a dignity in becoming unavailable, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Not because you hate others, but because you've learned to love yourself enough to stop explaining your worth. You begin to realize you don't need to reply to every message. You don't need to attend every gathering. You don't need to be liked by everyone who misunderstands your silence. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of truth. And here's the unexpected part. When you walk away from the noise, you don't lose people. You lose illusions. You lose trauma bonds. You lose performance-based love. You lose relationships where you were only valuable when convenient. And in their place, real ones emerge. Quiet ones, steady ones, built not on need but on truth. Because people who are whole don't fear your boundaries. They honor them. Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept yourself completely. And this is what sacred withdrawal ultimately leads to. Radical self. You begin to trust your instincts again. Hear your intuition again. Choose yourself again. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. You no longer need to be loud. You no longer need to prove. You don't chase closure. You become the closure. You don't fight for clarity. Your absence becomes the answer. I want you to hear this. You don't have to explain your healing. You don't have to justify your peace. You don't have to give anyone a map just because they got lost when you stopped overgiving. Your life is not an open book. It's a sacred text, and not everyone deserves a chapter. So, if you've gone quiet, stay quiet. If you've withdrawn, stay withdrawn. Not out of spite, but out of sacredness. This is your rite of passage. This is your rebirth. And the silence you're sitting in now, it's not the absence of connection. It's the presence of you. For the first time, in a long, long time. Comment below. I honor my withdrawal. I trust my return. Because every sacred disappearance is followed by a powerful re-emergence. And when you return, you won't be the same. You'll be whole. Part 3. The return. Why they're uncomfortable with your healing. You healed. You found silence. And then, yourself. But now, you return. Not to prove anything. Not to earn anything. But because you've remembered who you are. And strangely, the moment you return, the world begins to shift. Not in celebration, but in resistance. Because your healing, your peace, your boundaries are now a mirror, and not everyone can stand the reflection. Carl Jung once wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. What he didn't say directly, but what we now know, is that most people won't choose to understand themselves. They will reject the mirror. They will reject you, because your presence confronts the parts of them they've spent a lifetime avoiding. You didn't come back with rage. You came back with clarity. And clarity can feel like violence to someone living in emotional chaos. You no longer flinch when they guilt-trip you. You no longer explain yourself when you say no. You no longer overextend, and suddenly, you seem different. Why? Because they were never used to the real you. They were used to the version who overextended to be loved. The version who confused pleasing others with staying safe. But that version died in the silence of your sacred withdrawal. You've become and boundaries are triggering to people who benefited from your lack of them. Not necessarily because they're evil, but because your old self enabled them. You said yes too often. You gave more than you had. You tolerated the intolerable. And when that cycle ends, when you no longer play the role, they feel abandoned. But they were never abandoned. They just lost access to the version of you that abandoned yourself. Now, instead of engaging with their drama, you say nothing. Instead of reacting to their guilt, you respond with peace. Instead of chasing validation, you stay rooted in truth. And that's when projection begins. They'll say, you've changed. You think you're better than everyone now. You've become cold and distant. What they mean is, You're no longer who I remember, and that threatens the version of me that needs you to stay small. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of shadow projection. Everyone has a shadow, but most people will do anything to avoid facing it, and so they project it. They accuse others of what they cannot accept in themselves. So when you become whole, they see arrogance. When you set boundaries, they see rejection. When you embody peace, they feel attacked. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your growth reminds them of where they're still stuck. Understand this: your healing will not always be met with applause. It will sometimes be met with suspicion, silence, or slander. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're real, and realness disrupts the illusion. So what do you do when your peace threatens others? You stay rooted. You do not collapse back into old roles just to comfort their wounded ego. You do not shrink just to make their unhealed self feel taller. You do not trade your truth for temporary approval, because approval built on falsehood is just manipulation with a smile. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be free. Freedom is expensive, not because of the cost to you, but because of the cost to your relationships. When you become sovereign, your tribe changes. Some fall away quietly. Some leave with accusations. Some will try to pull you back into the identity you've outgrown. And it hurts, because these were once your people. But if they were only aligned with your wounded self, they cannot stay aligned with your healed one. You'll miss them. That's part of healing no one talks about. You'll miss the old roles, the old dynamics, the comfort of dysfunction. Even survival patterns have emotional residue. But missing it doesn't mean you're meant to return. It means you're human. It means you're grieving. You're grieving not just the people, but the part of you who once thought they were the answer. Jung taught that individuation requires confronting the tension of opposites, and now you face it. The tension between loneliness and authenticity. The tension between old love and new truth. The tension between pleasing others and honoring yourself. And in that tension, a deeper power awakens. You begin to realize you are not responsible for other people's comfort. You are not obligated to soothe their projections. You are not here to be someone's emotional mirror. You are here to be whole. So how do you move forward when people begin to attack what they once admired? With grace, with firmness, and with silence when necessary. You begin to embody this truth. What they think of me is not my business. Who I am becoming is... Let them misunderstand you. Let them whisper. Let them question your motives. Because while they're busy performing the old play, you're living a new life. While they gossip, you're growing. While they accuse, you're anchoring. While they remember the past version of you, you're building a future aligned with truth. Some people can only love you as long as you're dysfunctional. The moment you become emotionally healthy, they feel unneeded, because they never loved you. They loved the role you played in their story. And when you step out of that role, they say, you changed. You became selfish. You think you're better than us. But what they really mean is, you stopped abandoning yourself for my comfort. And they're right. You did. This is what it means to evolve. To disappoint others in order to be honest with yourself. To let go of connection that required your silence. To walk forward alone, because your inner voice is louder than their expectations. So here's what I want you to remember. Not everyone deserves access to your healed self. Some only knew the you that tolerated abuse, that stayed quiet, that confused love with emotional labor. That version of you they were comfortable with, but you've outgrown that comfort. You've earned your freedom. You don't need to convince them of your worth. You don't need to explain your evolution. Some things are too sacred for words. Your peace is one of them. Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." An awakening is not always beautiful. Sometimes it means outgrowing your own family. Sometimes it means walking away from a 10-year friendship because your silence was never respected. Sometimes it means being called the villain by people still committed to their wounds. Let them call you what they want. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be real. And finally, here's the most powerful truth. You are not returning to the world as the same person. You are returning as someone who no longer fears being misunderstood, no longer chases closure, no longer sacrifices peace to be polite. You are returning as someone who values truth over comfort, clarity over approval, and alignment over belonging. This is sacred work. This is psychological adulthood. This is the return. Drop a comment below. I don't chase love. I honor my peace. Because the next chapter of your life does not begin when they finally understand you. It begins when you finally stop needing them to. Part 4. After the storm. building a life that doesn't betray your soul. You've withdrawn. You've confronted your shadows. You've returned to the world, whole. Now comes the hardest part. Staying whole in a world that profits from your fragmentation. Because now that you've stopped betraying yourself for connection, you face a deeper question. How do I live from truth without going back to sleep? Carl Jung spoke often of the individuated self, the version of you that emerges after you've burned through the lies. This self is not built on image, not built on identity, not even built on healing. It's built on integration, the sacred weaving together of your light and shadow, your ego and soul, your pain and your purpose. And this self does not want to perform. It wants to live. So now you ask, how do I work in a world that rewards fake? How do I love in a world that confuses possession with passion? How do I speak in a world that misreads silence as guilt and depth as arrogance? These aren't just psychological questions. These are spiritual ones, because now you are tasked with protecting something fragile, sacred, and rare, your own inner peace. Here is the truth, Jung never showed. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. And now that you are conscious, you must build a life that does not require you to numb out again. Because the danger is real. If you re-enter the world without clarity, you'll compromise again. You'll people please again. You'll sacrifice your inner truth on the altar of fitting in. This is why so many relapse into false identities after a spiritual awakening. Because clarity without courage still leads to collapse. So what does it mean to live in alignment after you've become whole? It means your entire way of being changes. You no longer ask, what do they want from me? You ask, what honors my soul? And suddenly, the rules change. You say no without guilt. You leave when energy feels off. You no longer seek to be liked. You seek to be true. And that shift, while liberating, also means loss. Let's talk about the grief no one prepares you for. The grief of becoming someone your old life no longer recognizes. You don't fit in old friendships. You can't tolerate meaningless conversations. You're no longer willing to pretend. You crave realness, now, not just in people, but in environments, work, rhythm. You don't want to impress. You want to belong, but only to what is authentic. So here's the truth most spiritual journeys don't say out loud. Healing isn't just about peace. It's about rebuilding from nothing but your essence. It's the terrifying, exhilarating process of saying, I'm not going back. I will wait however long it takes to create a life that doesn't ask me to lie to myself. And that waiting, that's sacred. Because in the waiting, you find your next reality. So what does it look like to rebuild? It starts with radical discernment. You no longer say yes just because someone is nice. You no longer trust someone just because they say the right things. You watch actions, you feel energy, you trust your gut. Because your body now speaks what your mind used to ignore. This is the wisdom of wholeness. Your relationships evolve too. You begin to ask different questions. Does this person honor my inner world? Can we sit in silence without panic? Do they understand truth beyond performance? If the answer is no, you walk away. Not from cruelty, but from clarity. Because you know now, nothing is worth your peace. Not love, not community, not even opportunity. If it costs you your truth, it is too expensive. In Jungian psychology, this stage is called returning to the world with the treasure. Like the hero in mythology, you've descended into the unconscious, faced your dragons, claimed your gold, and now, you return not to gloat, but to serve. But service no longer means it means living so authentically that your presence becomes medicine. It means working from alignment, loving with depth, creating from soul. It means you don't need to preach. You embody, and embodiment is louder than any sermon. Let's talk about work. You may find you can no longer tolerate the job that once paid the bills, not because you're entitled, but because you now feel the cost. You feel the cost of environments that reward conformity over creativity, speed over stillness, profit over presence. So you begin to imagine something different, work that flows from your core values, work that feels like truth, not survival, work that nourishes instead of and slowly, you move toward it step by imperfect step. Let's talk about love. You no longer want romance that fills a void. You want love that witnesses your fullness. You don't want a savior. You want a sovereign mirror. Someone who sees you not as a project, but as a person. Someone who won't be intimidated by your depth, your stillness, your sacred no. You want to build intimacy that doesn't collapse under honesty. And you know now, that kind of love takes time. So you're willing to wait, willing to be alone. Because solitude is no longer loneliness. It's home. Let's talk about identity. You've stopped trying to explain yourself to people, committed to misunderstanding you. You're no longer interested in fitting in. You want to stand true. You stop over-describing your decisions. You let your life speak, because you realize, if your truth needs marketing, it's not truth. And if your soul needs justification, you're in the wrong room. This is the spiritual aftermath. You are quiet but powerful, soft but unwavering, present but not performative. You don't debate anymore. You just live. You don't chase anymore. You just align. You don't collapse anymore. You just walk away. But here's the hardest part. Sometimes the world still pulls. Old habits call you back. Old wounds whisper, you were easier to love when you were small. That's when you breathe. That's when you root. Because healing isn't a one-time event. It's a daily recommitment to your truth. You will be tempted to revert, to perform, to numb, to over-it. And that's when you remember, you are not here to be palatable. You are here to be free. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you are doing it. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but truly, you are becoming someone you don't have to betray to belong to. You are becoming the kind of person your inner child dreamed you'd grow into. You are becoming you. So what now? Now you build from wholeness, from integrity, from peace. You walk through the world, not asking for permission, but listening for resonance. You speak less, but say more. You chase less, but attract more. You fear less, but feel more. You live not from ego, but from essence. This is not the end of the journey. This is the beginning of your true life. Drop a comment below. I am no longer afraid to live from truth, because this is your time, not to perform, but to embody, to live a life that doesn't betray your soul. Part 5. The power of being unreachable, becoming emotionally self-sourced. There comes a point on the path of where something profound clicks inside you. You stop asking, do they see me? And you start asking, am I living in truth even when no one's watching? This is the stage Jung alluded to when he said the self is not built through approval, but through inner authority. And here's what that looks like. You stop chasing people who misunderstand your silence. You stop needing likes, comments, or praise to feel real. You stop waiting for someone to say, you're enough now, because something in you has awakened, something holy, unshakable, sovereign. You are no longer touchable by the noise. This is the power of being emotionally. It means you no longer depend on external energy to feel internally secure. You no longer rely on other people's attention to affirm your worth. You don't need people to agree with your path for you to trust it. You're not empty, you're full. So when others withdraw, you stay rooted. When others project, you stay clear. When others ghost, guilt, gaslight, or gossip, you do not chase. You do not collapse. You do not prove. You simply return to yourself. This level of peace is not found in books. It is earned through fire. It is the reward of years spent, sitting with your shame, walking through your abandonment wounds, and unhooking from every identity you built just to feel loved. It is not confidence. It is clarity. And it changes everything. People can feel when you don't need them, not in a detached, cold way, but in a sacred, magnetic way. You radiate something rare. Non-attachment without disconnection. Openness without emptiness. You don't pull, you don't perform. You just are. And that's enough. Let's be clear. This is not about isolation. It's not about not caring. It's about caring from wholeness, not from hunger. Because most people relate from hunger. They give to be validated. They love to be seen. They stay quiet to avoid being left. That's not intimacy. That's survival. And when you become self-sourced, you break that cycle. You stop relating from the wound. You start relating from the overflow. You no longer say, please love me so I can feel real. You say, I already feel real. Let's see what love can become when it's not based on fear. You no longer date for escape. You date for resonance. You no longer keep people around because you're scared of the void. You honor the void because that's where truth speaks. This is emotional sovereignty. You are no longer available for half-hearted connections. You are no longer afraid to walk away with silence. You are no longer shaken by someone's inability to meet you deeply, because you've met yourself fully, and that meeting changed everything. So, what does it look like to be emotionally? Let's go deeper. 1. You set boundaries without shaking. Not because you don't care, but because you care correctly. You've stopped mistaking guilt for love. You've stopped confusing anxiety for chemistry. You've stopped romanticizing chaos. So now your boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They do not say, stay away. They say, come close, only if you honor my truth, and if someone can't, you let them go without drama. Because your peace is your new baseline. 2. You don't chase clarity from the unclear. You used to over-explain. You used to send long texts, hoping they'd finally understand your worth. Now, you know your clarity is not up for negotiation. If someone wants to misunderstand you, you let them. If someone disappears, you don't run after closure. You are the closure. You no longer chase peace. You embody it. 3. You no longer perform to be chosen. You don't contort. You don't shrink. You don't wear masks to earn belonging. You show up as you are. And if someone can't hold that, you don't take it personally, because you know their discomfort with your depth has nothing to do with your value. You're not here to be everyone's cup of tea. You're here to be a truth tonic. Strong, bitter, real, and not for the faint of heart. 4. You trust your own rhythm. You stop rushing your healing. You stop forcing decisions. You stop needing a 5-step plan to feel safe. You trust your intuition. You trust divine timing. You trust that what is meant for you won't require self-abandonment to attain. You're not chasing anymore. You're aligning. 5. You love with depth without attachment. You are open, but you're not desperate. You are vulnerable, but you are not leaking. You love fully, but not foolishly. You are soft, but not submissive. You give, but not to be needed. Because you've realized the only love worth having is the kind that respects your wholeness. And if someone can't meet you there, you'd rather walk alone. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And when you do, you no longer beg others to accept you. You live with integrity. Not to impress, but because it's who you are now. You don't compromise anymore. Not out of pride, but out of peace. Let's talk about being unreachable. Not in a defensive way, not in an arrogant way, but in a soul-level way. Unreachable by manipulation. Unreachable by flattery. Unreachable by projections, gaslighting. Unreachable by those who want to distort your truth to make themselves more comfortable. Because you've left that frequency. You've upgraded your emotional ecosystem. You don't operate from fear. You don't respond from wounds. You don't overextend to keep people around. You're no longer afraid to be alone. Because your inner world is now a sanctuary, not a prison. This is what spiritual sovereignty looks like. You are deeply kind without being a doormat. You are deeply open without being unguarded. You are deeply loving without being dependent. You don't wait for others to give you permission to feel worthy. You don't wait for society to approve your path before walking it. You are no longer available for relationships that drain you just because you're scared to lose them. You are no longer available for conversations that require you to betray your silence. You are no longer available for a life that costs your soul. This is power. Not the loud kind. Not the stage kind. Not the kind that chases followers or fame. This is inner power. The kind that cannot be taken, because it was never given away. This is the kind of power that says, I belong to myself, and that's enough. So what do you do now? You live. You create. You love with eyes open. You work from alignment. You rest without guilt. You speak when it's true and stay silent when it's not. You build relationships that honor your clarity. You say no with peace. You say yes with joy. And you walk through the world with a calm, grounded grace that says, I no longer beg to be seen. I see myself. I no longer wait to be chosen. 1. Choose myself. This is what Jung meant when he talked about individuation, not becoming better, but becoming whole. Not becoming louder, but becoming real. Not becoming invulnerable, but becoming unshakable. Because when you return to yourself, fully, quietly, deeply, you become your own source of safety, truth, and light. And from that place, you are finally free. Drop a comment below. I am no longer available for anything that costs my peace. You are not here to be drained. You are here to embody truth. You are not here to be accepted by the many. You are here to be aligned with the few. You are not here to seek love. You are here to become it. Part 6. Conscious Reintegration. How to return to the world without losing yourself. There comes a strange moment after deep inner transformation. One Jung never wrote much about, but you will know it when it comes. It happens after the shadow work, after the sacred withdrawal, after you've become emotionally self-sourced, sovereign, whole, You look around and realize, I can't stay hidden forever. You've built your sanctuary. You've healed the wounds. You've learned how to be alone, how to self-regulate, how to stand without leaning. And now, you're being asked to re-enter the world without abandoning yourself. This is the test of conscious reintegration. Not going back to who you were, not returning to the old self, but returning to the world as the new self. Most people think healing ends with solitude, but solitude is not the finish line. It's the training ground. You learn to be still. You learn to listen. You learn to feel without flinching. Now you're being asked to live from that stillness out loud. This is not easy, because the world you're returning to hasn't changed. People are still asleep. They're still projecting. They're still playing roles and chasing illusions. But you have changed. So now the work becomes this. How do I stay awake in a world that wants me unconscious? How do I stay clear among people who need me to be foggy? How do I stay real in a system built on performance? This is the final fire. Jung warned of this phase when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he never said that becoming who you are would threaten who people thought you were. Because when you reintegrate with the world, you will be confronted with expectations, projections, and roles that no longer fit. People will say, "You've changed, you're distant, you're selfish. You used to be more fun. You used to agree with me." And you'll have to decide, do I shrink to keep the peace, or do I let truth disrupt the performance? This is the moment where integrity must outweigh comfort. Let's break this down. What does conscious reintegration look like? How do you show up in your family, career, relationships, and society after the old mask has fallen away? Here are 6 principles to live by. 1. Lead with energy, not explanation. You do not owe the world a play-by-play of your review. You do not need to explain your withdrawal, your silence, your boundaries. Let your new vibration do the talking. People who are meant to resonate with you will feel it, and those who don't, let them go. Not with bitterness, with clarity. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to embody what's true. 2. Choose resonance over familiarity. You will be tempted to reconnect with old friends, family dynamics, or identities just because they feel safe. But familiar does not mean aligned. Familiar does not mean true. Familiar often means trauma. So here's the new rule. If it costs your peace, if it dulls your spirit, if it requires you to dim, it's not for you. No matter how nostalgic, no matter how long you've known them, no matter how guilty you feel, you are no longer available for any connection that requires self-betrayal. 3. Stay rooted in your inner authority. The more clear you become, the more resistance you will face. People are not used to wholeness. They're used to neediness, people-pleasing, and scripts. When you disrupt that dynamic, they might react. They might accuse you of being too harsh, too withdrawn, too selfish. That's okay. Let them react. Your job is not to manage their emotions. Your job is to live in truth. You are not responsible for the discomfort your clarity causes in others. Stay rooted, stay gentle, stay firm. 4. Practice sacred silence. There will be moments when everything in you wants to defend your growth, to explain your boundaries, to prove you've changed, to validate your path. But that impulse, it's a test. Your old self needed to be seen. Your new self doesn't need applause. You now understand that your evolution is between you and your soul, not the crowd. Let your silence be your sanctuary. Let your life be your evidence. 5. Let people meet you where you are, not where you were. Some people will try to pull you back into the old role you played. The peacemaker, the fixer, the one who stayed small to make others comfortable. But that version of you is gone. Do not resurrect it just to make others feel safe. If they can't meet you in your new energy, that's okay. They're not wrong. They're just not meant for this version of you. And that's not abandonment. That's 6. Serve with soul, not sacrifice. You are now called to live your truth in the real world. That doesn't mean preaching. It means becoming a quiet presence of peace in chaotic spaces. It means holding your frequency when others collapse into drama. It means speaking with calm clarity in rooms full of noise. You become a lighthouse, not by dragging ships to shore, but by standing still in your light. You are not here to fix. You are not here to prove. You are here to embody. Carl Jung said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." You've passed through the inferno. You've seen your shadows. You've made peace with your demons. You've dropped the mask, burned the costume, and walked naked into the silence. Now you walk forward not as a healed person, but as a real person. This is the work. Conscious reintegration is not a return to society. It's a return to presence within society. It's bringing your stillness into the noise, your awareness into the distraction, your peace into the madness, and doing it all without losing yourself again. So now, when you speak, you mean it. When you love, you see the other person, not the projection. When you listen, you're here. And when you walk into a room, you don't enter as someone hungry for attention. You enter as someone who is already whole. This changes everything. You're no longer trying to find yourself. You are yourself. And you don't fear rejection because rejection no longer defines your worth. You don't fear isolation because solitude taught you how to thrive in stillness. You don't fear being misunderstood because you no longer outsource your identity. You've come home. Now you simply live from that home, and people will feel it. They'll feel the calm, the quiet clarity, the grounded grace. Some will be drawn to it, others will be repelled by it. You'll remain whole, rooted, free. Comment below. I am no longer shrinking to be loved. I show up whole, or not at all, because this is the end of your sacred withdrawal, but it's the beginning of your sacred embodiment. The world is loud, but you are clear. The world is asleep, but you are awake. The world is rushing, but you move from stillness. Now, let them talk. Let them misunderstand. You are no longer returning to the world to fit in. You are returning to light it up. Part 7. Create from the self. How to express without ego. Perform without losing your soul, now that you've returned to the world. Not to play your old role, but to live from your truth. A new question begins to form. What am I here to create? Not just what you do to survive, not just how you cope, but how you express, how you give voice to the truth that lives in you. This is the next chapter. You've done the withdrawal. You've done the shadow work. You've begun living from wholeness. But what now? Now comes the sacred act of creation. Carl Jung believed that true individuality, the self, was not a static state of being. It was a generative force. It doesn't just know, it expresses. It doesn't just see truth, it transmits truth. The self is creative by nature. And when you touch it, when you stabilize in it, you feel a quiet, unshakable urge to build something, to give shape to the formless things inside you. Whether that means writing, music, film, teaching, healing, building something from nothing, you are not here to perform for applause. You are here to create from alignment. This is where most people go wrong. They awaken, they heal, they start to express, and then they get seduced by the outer reaction. How many followers? How many clicks? Who's watching? Who's clapping? What's trending? And suddenly the sacred act of creation becomes a performance again. Ego slips in through the back door. You begin to create not from soul, but from strategy. Not from essence, but from algorithm. And if you're not careful, you lose yourself again. So what does it mean to truly create from the self? How do you share your voice, your story, your message, your vision without being pulled back into persona? Let's walk through it. 1. Anchor your creativity in service, not when you create from the ego, you ask, what will they think of me? Will they like it? Will I go viral? But when you create from the self, you ask, what truth wants to move through me today? What would I create if no one ever saw it? How can this serve the one who needs it most? This subtle shift changes everything. Now your work is not about proving value. It's about offering truth, not about attention, but authenticity. 2. Detach from outcome. Focus on the offering. Jung warned against becoming identified with the persona, the mask we wear for the world. When we care too much about outcome, we begin to distort the truth we carry. We water it down, we dramatize it, we shape it for applause, and we lose the core of the thing. To create from the self is to say, this is what I see, this is what I feel, this is what I must express, even if it's not popular, even if it's not perfect, even if no one applauds. You become a vessel, not a brand. 3. Let your scars be your ink. True creation is not sanitized. It's not performance art. It's not pretending to be whole. It's bleeding on the page. It's showing what's real. Jung said, only the wounded physician heals, which means only the person who's seen darkness can light the way for others. Only the one who's been shattered can speak to the broken. If you try to make your work too polished, too positive, too palatable, it won't land. But if you speak from the center of your scar, you create something that vibrates with truth. That's what people feel. Not perfection, but realness. 4. Protect your inner sanctum. When you start creating publicly, whether art, content, writing, music, you open yourself to feedback. Some of it helpful, some of it hostile. If your identity is still fragile, you'll take it personally. You'll chase approval, you'll fear criticism. So the key is this: create from the inside out, but anchor yourself behind the creation. Your soul is not for sale. Yourself is not on display. You share from it, but you don't confuse yourself with your work. This is the discipline. 5. Stay aligned, not addicted. There will be a temptation to feed the machine, to post more, to get louder, to tweak what worked for clicks. But beware, if your output becomes detached from your inner truth, it becomes noise. So always return to stillness. Ask, is this aligned with my truth? Would I still create this if no one responded? Is this coming from fear or fullness? Let your inner compass lead, not the metrics, not the dopamine, not the algorithm. Only then will your work hold real power. 6. Let your work change you. This is the secret few talk about. Your real creation isn't the book, the video, the painting, or the product. Your real creation is yourself. The act of creating from the soul transforms the one who creates. It sharpens you, softens you, burns away your false self. So the work isn't just about what you make, it's about who you become in the making. Let your work be your ritual. Let it be your sacred fire. Let it shape you as much as it serves others. Carl Jung once wrote, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct, acting from inner necessity." You are not creating for success. You are creating because something within you must be born. This is not about content. This is not about art. It's about soul expression. It's about becoming a channel for something ancient, eternal, and unseen. It's about living a life that rings with truth. So now you're not just awake, you're alive. You're not just surviving, you're expressing. You're not just healed, you're generative. And everything you create is a ripple that reaches beyond time. Someone, somewhere will find your words, your work, your truth, and awaken. Not because you were popular, but because you were true. Comment below. I don't create to perform, I create to transmit truth. Because from this day forward, your voice is no longer a mask. It's a mirror. Your expression is no longer performance. It's prayer. You are no longer a persona. You are a living transmission of the self. Sacred sovereignty. How to trust your inner knowing in a world that wants to lead you astray. You've walked the lonely road. You've returned from sacred withdrawal. You've begun to create from your deepest truth. And now, something unexpected happens. The world tries to lead you again. Not always with malice, often with good intentions. But still voices emerge, whispering, "Follow this system. Read this scripture. Obey this truth. This is the way. That is not." And suddenly, after all your growth, all your pain, all your healing, you feel that old tug again. The pull to abandon your own knowing. Carl Jung warned of this. He saw how spiritual seekers, even the most sincere, often replace one form of slavery with another. They leave the crowd, only to become dependent on a teacher, or a dogma, or a structure. They trade social conditioning for spiritual conditioning. Different language, same loss of sovereignty. And so Jung asked us to remember, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. Your path is not written in any book. It is not stamped with any symbol. It is not guaranteed by any institution. It is born in the fire of your own heart. Sacred sovereignty is this: the ability to walk with the sacred, to trust the new, the invisible, the divine, without abandoning your inner compass, to receive without surrendering your center, to seek wisdom without silencing your own. It is a mature spirituality, not obedience, but resonance, not worshipping others' light, but remembering your own. So how do you live as a sovereign soul in a world obsessed with labels, tribes, and authority? Let's walk it through. 1. Beware of spiritual seduction. When you've been through pain, real pain, you want answers. You crave relief, certainty, direction. And many spiritual systems offer that. Clear rules, hierarchy, a sense of belonging. But often, beneath the surface, they say, your truth is not enough. You need us to find yourself. You're broken, let us fix you. It's the oldest lie in the book, whether it's a cult, a coach, or a community. Anything that asks you to give away your authority is not sacred. It is parasitic. A true teacher never says, "Follow me." They say, "Find you," to test everything against your inner knowing. Jung said the self is the ultimate authority, the deepest center of your psyche where the personal and the universal meet. When something is true for you, you don't need to be convinced. You feel it in your body, in your bones, in your dreams. So ask yourself, does this teaching align with what I know in my soul? Is this path making me more whole or more dependent? Do I feel empowered or subtly shamed? If it diminishes you, if it silences your intuition, if it separates you from yourself, it is not sacred. It is spiritual manipulation. 3. Dare to walk your own path. You will be misunderstood. If you don't fully buy into a system, you're lost. If you don't adopt the tribe's language, you're confused. If you say, "I'm still listening inward," you're arrogant. So be it. Sacred sovereignty means you don't need validation to stay aligned. Your truth does not require consensus. Your path does not need permission. This is the great initiation, to walk the unknown with only your soul as guide. 4. Hold space for paradox. The self is not binary. You can love the mystic and challenge his teachings. You can study the tradition and discard the parts that don't resonate. You can believe in the divine and still honor your inner voice first. This is the mature spiritual mind. It doesn't cling to black and white thinking. It holds paradox. You can bow and stand tall. You can learn and still question. You can belong and still walk alone. This isn't rebellion, it's integration. 5. Let the sacred become inward, not externalized. Eventually, the rituals dissolve. The teachers fall away, the books gather dust, and what remains? The felt sense of the divine within you. You don't pray to be heard, you pray to listen. You don't meditate to escape, you meditate to return. You are no longer chasing the light, you are the light remembering itself. This is sacred sovereignty, a direct relationship to the infinite that requires no. So let's close this journey together. You've walked with the deepest truths Carl Jung left behind, not as theory, but as living fire. You've withdrawn from the noise. You've faced your shadow. You've met your inner child. You've become intimate with the self. You've created from wholeness. And now, you are sovereign, not because you own your life, but because you finally belong to yourself. No mask, no performance, no borrowed truth. Only this moment. Only this breath. Only this still, small voice inside you saying, you are already whole. There is nothing to prove. Your soul is the authority now. So let this be your final reminder. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not alone. You are aligned. You are not lost. You are leading yourself home. Comment below. I walk with sacred sovereignty. My soul is my compass. And if this series awakens something in you, return to it. Not to remember my words, but to remember yourself. Because this path you're on is not a trend. It's not a phase. It's not even a philosophy. It is the reclamation of your deepest truth. Welcome home.